There are some things you need to see to believe, though sometimes that isn't enough. Throughout history, people have done some crazy things that were considered completely normal, though we would never even consider doing them today. Have you ever thought about mailing your baby to grandma's house for the weekend? I'm sure we all have. But many years ago, people actually did it, and it was perfectly normal and legal. But before we jump into it, be sure to hit that like button and ring the notification bell for more amazing videos. Let's get started. Sending children through the post. Let's start off with something truly bizarre. Back when the Swiss Post began to send parcels, people began to wonder what sorts of strange things they could mail and get away with it. Some parents even thought about mailing their own children. Around this time, the Swiss Post was considered one of the greatest ways to ship goods. They had begun to step on the toes of many small businesses when they began offering parcel delivery, allowing you to ship whatever you could imagine. Some parents wanted to not only send their packages through the mail, but also their children. There were many headlines about this at the time. A great example is when a young couple sent their 8-month-old son through the mail to visit his grandmother. The child weighed just 5 kilograms, so he was considered a lightweight package. If that shocks you, imagine this: the shipment only cost 15 cents. Even more disturbing is that the parents purchased insurance for the child's life for just 50 cents. We couldn't imagine shipping a child these days, but that was totally normal back then. Cigarette advertisements. These days, we do our best to keep cigarettes out of the hands of young people and children. It's hard to turn on the television without seeing anti-nicotine ads pop up from time to time. However, just a few decades ago, this wasn't the case. Cigarette advertisements were one of the most profitable forms of advertisement. Back then, it wouldn't be strange to see advertisements that claimed to show the benefits of smoking. Some ads even showed mothers smoking while holding their babies. If this were to happen these days, there would be an outcry from the furthest corners of the world calling for the ads to be removed. Smoking was shockingly normal back then, and no one thought anything of it. Obviously, the times are changing, and cigarettes are becoming less common. But get this, just a few decades ago, many advertisements were specifically targeted toward children. Camel's use of a mascot is believed to be one of the most blatant children's cigarette advertisements ever made. I don't know about you, but I'm developing a cough just looking at all these cigarette ads. Gross.
Is he okay?
The Human Zoo. The Human Zoo may sound utterly disturbing, but this was a very real occurrence between 1870 and 1940. Human zoo exhibits were popular across Europe at this time, and the goal was to show off people of many different nationalities, skin colors, hair colors, and ethnicities. Some of these exhibits would showcase over 100 people at a time, and thousands of people would gather from the nearby cities to buy tickets. Could you imagine? While some of these people were paid for their time, such as the people who were caged during freak shows, many of them were kept against their will. It has been said that some of these people were forced to fight one another to the death, all for the sake of entertainment. These days, we understand a whole lot more about human rights, and I like to think that we all do our best to treat each other equally. Times were different back then, and I don't know about you, but I'm glad to live in modern times. These days, we just have to worry about getting cut in line at the grocery store. Imagine fearing that you'd be captured and displayed in a human zoo. Ugh. Gilbert U238 Lab Set. The Gilbert U238 was a small lab set that was designed to teach children about science and atomic energy. This toy was designed during the infamous era of the atomic bomb. These days, we would fear being blown up by such a thing. However, in America and other countries throughout the 1950s, people embraced the idea of such a thing. There were atomic bomb hairstyles, cakes, toys, and so much more. The Gilbert toy set was released sometime between 1951 and 1952 and would give kids access to highly radioactive chemicals. Kids could examine dangerous substances such as uranium, as well as radioactive powder. Bear in mind, we didn't understand how harmful radiation could be back then. But what could have been going through the minds of parents that purchased this kit for their children? I certainly wouldn't want my child learning how to create an atomic bomb at that age, or any age for that matter. Coca-Cola and cocaine. You knew we'd end up here, didn't you? This is one of the most well-known facts in the modern world. Coca-Cola used to contain real cocaine. How else do you think it would give you that massive burst of energy? Coca-Cola is just as popular today as it was over 100 years ago. Drinks like this are known for being one of the leading causes of diabetes and obesity. Yet, we still drink these sugary beverages as much as we drink water. It has been said that when Coca-Cola originally hit store shelves, it contained as much as 250 milligrams of cocaine, as well as tons of caffeine. By the 1940s, cocaine was banned. There were reports of people falling ill from drinking the beverage, and at least 13 people lost their lives from an overdose. These days, the recipe has seen a major change, and the drink is far different than it once was. There's no longer cocaine in Coca-Cola, though there is a ton of caffeine. So the next time you're thinking about drinking coffee as an afternoon pick-me-up, maybe reach for the sweet, refreshing taste of Coca-Cola. Bayer's Heroin. You may not want to believe this, but Bayer, the #1 seller of aspirin and other over-the-counter medications, once sold heroin. Back in these days, heroin was touted as being the remedy for virtually any bodily inconvenience you could imagine. It could treat a headache, muscle pain, bronchitis, and so much more. But most of all, it could help you sleep. This drug was everywhere, and many parents would put their children to bed with cough syrup that had been mixed with heroin. Problems began to arise when we found out that the medication was highly addictive. It didn't take long for it to be banned in the United States and other countries. And these days, you cannot even manufacture the drug without being sent to federal prison. This may seem baffling to us these days, but heroin was once one of the most popular over-the-counter medications on the market. Forget Tylenol or Advil. Pop a pill of heroin, and you'll be good as new. We're obviously being sarcastic here. This drug led to serious issues for many people, and we don't know for sure, but it's expected that hundreds of thousands of people likely passed away due to overdosing on the drug unintentionally. Hysteria. About 100 years ago, hysteria was considered both a physical and mental ailment. We didn't have the knowledge we have today about our mental well-being and various mental illnesses. Rather, women who were experiencing anxiety or other issues would be prescribed something that will knock their socks off: masturbation. If a woman ever went to a doctor for hysteria, the doctor would most likely tell her to masturbate to calm her nerves. These days, we obviously know this is a load of garbage, but hey, it usually works, right? Baby cages. Try to hold your outrage until the end of this topic, because it's about to get wild. Baby cages used to exist, but not just any cages. Rather, cages that you could mount onto your window to allow your children to crawl around outside while hanging hundreds of feet above the ground. These cages were created for small families that lived in cramped apartments at the time. If you had nowhere to let your baby soak in some sun rays, you could simply place them in a cage like a bird. Doctors endorsed these cages and insisted that it helped the children grow big and strong by soaking up sun rays. Forget about the fact that you're putting your child's life in the faith of some basic metal wire and cheap screws or bolts. What were these people thinking? Tattoo head collection. Many of us like to collect things, whether it be stamps, cars, toys, or something else entirely. But what if I told you that some people used to collect preserved human heads? The Mokomokai are heads of the New Zealand Maori people that have been preserved and covered with multiple tattoos. Various tribes and groups of people preserved their dead. That's not the strange part. Things get weird when you realize that these heads were bought and sold by thousands of people as valuable commodities. The trend only began to fade away sometime in the 19th century, when people began to get their heads on straight and realized that collecting human heads was weird, very weird. Back during this time period, men were known for having many tattoos that would cover their faces. Women would usually only have tattoos on their chin or lips. Each tattoo was unique and would tell a story about that person's life. During times of war, it's known that people would trade these heads in exchange for weapons or ammunition. That just shows how valuable these heads truly were. Today, we couldn't even imagine preserving someone's head and selling it. But back then it was very trendy and helped preserve the stories and lives of individuals who have since passed on. When you think of it that way, it may sound more enticing, but these days we will just archive the person's Facebook page so friends and family can scroll through their page and relive old memories. I think that's much more normal and acceptable, don't you? Garden hermits. Ornamental hermits, better known as garden hermits, were people who were asked to live in small cottages that would typically be built on the property of a very wealthy person or in a public area. Hermits typically lived between the 18th and 19th centuries and would enter a special agreement with their masters to live on their land for free in exchange for following a set of rules and guidelines. One of these rules was that the hermits must emerge from their homes at certain times of the day and expose themselves to sunlight and anyone from the public who may be passing by. Park owners and guests would line up to see the hermits emerge, very similar to being in a human zoo. This may seem weird, but keep in mind that this was a full-time job for these people. They were tasked with living in complete isolation and only emerging from their homes a handful of times each day. Thankfully, this lifestyle and employment were banned around 1915. So there you have it, 10 of the strangest things that people used to think were normal. Let us know what you think. Which of these did you find the oddest or interesting? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Before you click away, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos.